Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this evening. It's really wonderful to see so many faces. Well, not quite see, but there are lots of people in the crowd, and yeah, it's great to be here. Cool. So I'm going to be speaking about how to start well at a fully remote job. I think a lot of these things can also be applied to if you were doing an in-person job. But yeah, a couple of things I learned along the way. Okay, so a little bit of a credential, I guess. My first job, I was at a company called Nona, and somehow or another, well, now that I look back on it, I kind of understand why, but in my first 13 months, I've figured out how to get 3 raises, 13 raises in 3 months, no ways, that would be out of hand. But yeah, Nona is a great company, and I learned a lot during my time there. All right, so how did I do this? Well, the first thing is a quote that I heard a while back, and I think it's true, is excellence is doing things that others don't expect. And this is something that kind of sets you apart a little bit. And I'll give you an example. So like my first job, I just taught myself development, and I created like courses that I was doing with GDG. And that was totally something that the people in the company didn't expect, and they're like, "Oh wow, this is beyond your role, and this is interesting." So, and that really is what sets you apart. Is what gets you noticed within a company, and I think that's just like an interesting thought. Before I go on, I'm going to share a lot of thoughts. If you do agree or disagree, please do. And I'm very happy to have discussions about it and answer any questions. These are just practical and philosophical thoughts that I've had with my experience of working remotely and working in general. The next one is don't outshine the master. Not quite remote work, but like it's something that I ran into at my first job. Where I was trying to do so much amazing stuff and trying to do so many interesting things. And it is this crazy thing where if you start to be perceived as better than perhaps your job or your manager or whoever else is tasked with another job, and it looks like you're doing better than them, be careful of that, especially in terms of taking credit for stuff. And that's something that I learned the hard way because I tried to do too much, and then people felt threatened. And yeah, it's a tricky line to walk. Anyway, not quite remote work, but still good in general. Oh wow, Slack, thank you. Next one about like getting kind of like a raise and so on is if you don't ask, you don't get. If you ask, you might get. This is something that I did, and I tried to reason, and that is kind of why I did get the raises that I did get. Okay, so this is another one, and this is, I think, that perhaps the most important out of all of them that I found that has been incredibly useful in my career, is give very carefully considered and actionable feedback. Oh wow, I wrote considered twice there. Because it's that important, apparently. But it will be appreciated and remembered. So if you take your time to write out and say, hey, here's something that I think could be different, then do it. So I read a book recently called No Rules by Reed Hastings and Aaron Meyer. Reed Hastings is the CEO of Netflix, and Aaron Meyer wrote a very, very great book on culture within companies. And anyway, they collaborated together to put together the rules of, well, the kind of culture of Netflix. And one of their big things is feedback. And they have what they call the 4 A's of feedback. Although they've now changed it to 5, but I wrote the 4 down here. So the first one is aim to assist. So your feedback should always be given with positive intent. You should never give feedback out of frustration. It should be thought about and carefully and helpful. The next thing is actionable. So can it be actionable that you're now giving to your manager, and now you're trying to build rapport with this person, and it's like, is this actually something that they can do something with? Like, don't just tell somebody, hey, you need to be more assertive. Well, how can this person be more assertive? Can they voice their opinion in a certain context? Like, can you be specific? And then appreciate and accept and discard. That's more on the receiving side of feedback. And if you want to, I highly encourage reading the book or just Googling the summary of the book and reading more on what appreciation and accept and discard is. Wow, I'm going to Slack, thank you. Let me turn off these notifications. There we go. Sorry about that. All right. So those were the first few lessons that I wanted to share and learned while working actually in a non-remote context. And so then when I got into now fully remote, right? And that was when I joined Prodigy Finance. It was a fully remote company at the time. And I had to kind of think, okay, well, what are the soft skills? What are the kind of things that, I can take from there and move forward with? The first one is a line that I read in a book called called How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. I know it's a terrible title, but it's a very interesting book. And the one line stuck out for me, and it's been really a guiding light for me in joining this company, or Prodigy Finance. And I think it's something that I hope to carry with me. And it's, if you act enthusiastic, you will become enthusiastic. It's the craziest thing. I didn't really think much of it when I read it, but I decided to give it a go anyway. And I kid you not, it works. And what's crazy is if you coach somebody with enthusiasm in a video call, or you raise your hands. Maya, who's a GDG organizer, does this really well. Her excited face, I've been trying to replicate it for ages, but I just haven't been quite able to master it because she has a skill for it. But if you can give enthusiasm, you tend to get it mirrored back to you. And yeah, there's another thought that I'll share to you that I read in another book just now. Next one is, don't come in on your white horse. And you sometimes need to be a bit gentler when you introduce new ideas, and you have to have patience that things will change. Together with this, it's also about being a listener. So listening when you are, in this remote context, having calls with people, understanding their perspectives. Don't just come in and just be like, hey, we're changing everything. This is how it's going to be. Allow people the opportunity to become comfortable with the idea, socialize an idea. If you want to change, let's say, how your agile process runs, you want to change a meeting, allow people to carefully buy in and be sensitive to that. I haven't always done it very well, but I think it's something that for sure I could be better at. But I think that it's something that I'm striving for, and I think it's useful. Yeah. Then, like a while back, I read this book called The Like Switch, and this is going to maybe get a little bit like on the people-y side, but there's a golden rule of friendship. People like people who make them feel good about themselves, and I think that's like something to think about. Like when you have interactions with other people, how can you find ways to make them feel good about themselves? So that's about having enthusiasm about their ideas. That's about giving them, a shout out when they've done something well. This is not meant to be a tool of like manipulation, or I hope it's not like, it shouldn't be taken as such, but it's like when somebody has earned something, let them know and help them feel good about themselves. And I think that applies very much into the work context. So if you're remote and somebody's done something well, we'll give them a shout out on Slack and just be like, hey, you did this really well on a channel, whether that's public or to them in person. But it's really important to send those messages and even repeat them if necessary. Then from the same book, and this is perhaps just going to get a little bit philosophical for a hot second. There are 4 pillars of relationships. The first is frequency. So how often are you meeting with a certain person? Duration, how much time do you spend with this person? And, oh wow, and appreciate is the one that I missed out from a different slide. But proximity is when you spend time together with somebody in the same space. And appreciation, the appreciation point should be written intensity. So how intense is the experience that you're having with this person? Is, you know, things like if you were in, let's say, had a difficult experience with, you know, an experience that, like, for example, you went through army training with somebody else, you're going to be very tightly bonded because that was a very intense experience. Same thing as if you experience a trauma, or in a more positive context, if you have a really good laugh, you know, or you have a good party with somebody, you will become bonded with that. So how does this play out, right? We can't be proximity, we can't be in the same space as other people. So then we have to think about, well, how do we do frequency? How do we do duration? How do you do, you know, intensity? And then proximity, you know, as Tanaka pointed out, you know, you should still try and meet in person if possible from time to time. But let's get practical for a moment on those points, yeah. And the thing is that yeah, we'll get into it. So in terms of frequency, this is something that I really decided that I would do when I joined Prodigy Finance, being fully remote, was setting up a 30-minute virtual coffee every week or two with a new person within the company. And it really worked out well. I got to know a lot of people in the company. I got to understand different perspectives. I got to understand, okay, this team is doing this thing. This person is responsible for that. And it really helps you understand more broadly, you know, who to talk to about what. And it gives you also this cool sense of community. But the part that I had to kind of suppress in myself was that kind of fear of rejection and reaching out and being vulnerable and asking somebody, hey, do you want to have a virtual coffee with me? And I really had to suppress that feeling. But now looking back on it, it was completely unfounded. There wasn't a single person who I ever asked for a virtual coffee who declined. Everybody made a plan. That's from the junior people all the way up through to the CEO of the company. I managed to find time with all of them, and they were happy to fit me in because they saw it was, you know, an initiative, somebody saying, hey, you know, they're new here. Like literally my message would be like, hey, I just joined recently, I'm trying to get to know everybody, do you have time for 30 minutes for virtual coffee? And really very cool. And if you want to hit that pillar duration, maybe then in future set a longer meeting. If you want to hit that thing of frequency, maybe have another call with them, you know, in maybe a month's time or 2 weeks' time, and you'll find that your rapport and your relationships do grow just by, you know, targeting any of those pillars. It's quite amazing. So another thought: pace yourself. So I think people value improvement over time over upfront performance, and I realize saying that is quite contentious and perhaps not something that managers or employers want to hear, but I think it's kind of true, because, you know, you should pace yourself on the technical work, I believe, but you should rather devote time to getting to know people more in your first few months. People won't expect huge technical deliverables from you in your first couple of months. So it is wise to rather spend that time, get to know the people, because then you can ramp up your technical side and people will start to see your performance on a bigger level. Big one, I think pair coding is like the future. If you're a software developer, hey, pair coding is one way, that short way to get on board onto a project, understand the different pieces, rather than jamming away on your keyboard and not really getting anywhere because you don't understand full context. I highly, highly, highly recommend pair coding wherever possible. Again, I want to reiterate listening. There's probably a lot of history, especially if it's a more established company. It's wise to take the time to really understand why decisions were made and how they got to be where they were. Visual, I think it's really important to have good lighting. You know, if you have your camera on, make sure that you have a nice background, whether that's virtual backgrounds, changing them. Everybody has a different style, but make sure that, you know, you just aren't just a simple silhouette, and, you know, you can't just like, you know, okay, my lighting is decent here, but you know, that people can see your face and see your facial expression and so on. Yeah, and that's the end. yeah, that's the end of the talk. I did see some questions float in, or maybe one. Can we see Maya's excited face? Yeah, definitely. But yeah, just some thoughts. If you would like to reach out to me, LinkedIn's the place. Yeah, that's it.